How much money exists in the United States right now? Go ahead, take a guess. Trillions? A few dozen trillion maybe? Whatever number you're thinking of, it's completely wrong. Most people, including top economists, only count the money they can actually see. The cash in US vaults. The funds tracked by the Federal Reserve. But there is another pile of money, a much, much larger pile, and it lives entirely outside of America, outside of American law, regulation, or control. It's called the Eurodollar market. It is a ghost network estimated to be worth somewhere between $100 and $150 trillion. That is roughly 5 to 6 times larger than the entire official US money supply. And here is the part that will keep you up at night. It wasn't created by Wall Street or the Federal Reserve. It was accidentally invented by the Soviet Union in the dead center of the Cold War. This is the story of how America's deadliest enemy built the most powerful financial weapon in human history. The year is 1950. The Cold War is at a boiling point. Both sides have nuclear weapons, and both are watching each other's every financial move. Now here is a massive problem that history books completely skip over. The Soviet Union desperately needed US dollars. Why would communist Russia need its capitalist enemy's currency? Because back then, just like today, almost everything in global trade was priced in dollars. Oil, grain, steel. If you wanted to buy it on the international market, you paid in greenbacks. So, the Soviets accumulated massive piles of dollars through exports and covert operations. And like everyone else, they parked those dollars safely inside American banks. Then, in June 1950, the Korean War erupted. Soviet leadership panicked. They realized that if Washington decided to freeze Soviet assets tomorrow, Russia's entire international purchasing power would vanish overnight. Soviet economists asked a question that would reshape global finance forever. What if we moved our dollars completely out of America? If those dollars were physically held in European banks, like London or Paris, could the US government still touch them? The answer was a resounding no. The Soviets quietly shifted their cash to 2 specific institutions, Banque Commerciale pour l'Europe du Nord in Paris, whose official cable address was literally Eurobank, and the Moscow Narodny Bank in London. These became known as Eurodollars, simply US dollars held anywhere outside of America. The Soviets achieved their goal. Their money was safe from US hands. But they had accidentally ripped open a loophole so massive that Western bankers would spend the next 70 years driving entire economies through it. British banks noticed the move immediately. London was strangled by strict post-war currency regulations on the British pound. But then a clever British banker looked at those Soviet deposits and asked, what if we started lending those unregulated dollars to anyone who needs them, completely free from American rules? That single question changed the world. To understand how this exploded, you have to look at how banking actually works. When you deposit $100 into a normal bank, they don't lock it in a vault. They lend most of it out. Under standard US rules, they keep a small percentage as a cushion, say 10%, and lend the remaining $90 to someone else. That person deposits it, and the bank lends out $81. Through this chain reaction, your original 100 real dollars turns into hundreds of dollars of credit. This is called fractional reserve banking. In the US, this engine has strict guardrails, interest rate caps, and heavy Federal Reserve oversight. Now, imagine taking all those guardrails away. That is the Eurodollar market. When dollars sit in a London bank, the Bank of England doesn't regulate them because they aren't pounds. The US Federal Reserve can't touch them because they aren't on American soil. For decades, there were literally zero reserve requirements on Eurodollars. If a London bank took in a $1 million deposit, they could turn around and lend out the exact same $1 million. The money multiplied infinitely, with absolutely no speed limits. By the 1960s, American multinational corporations realized they could borrow dollars in London much cheaper than in New York. Then came the 1970s oil shocks, pumping billions of petrodollars from OPEC nations straight into these offshore accounts. Developing nations flooded in to borrow cheap cash, and eventually, Wall Street giants set up shop in London just to play in this unregulated Wild West. But this system didn't just grow, it redefined what money is. Traditional money is physical cash and traceable bank accounts. Eurodollars are different. They are just a massive stack of interlocking promises, IOUs layered on top of IOUs across the globe. When experts say this ghost market is worth up to $150 trillion, they don't mean there are physical vaults filled with bills. They mean there is a $150 trillion web of unregulated credit running the global economy, and no single government on Earth can track or control it. You might be wondering, what does a 1950s Soviet banking trick have to do with your everyday life? The answer is everything. The Ghost Network is the invisible engine behind almost every major economic crisis of the modern era. Take global sanctions. When the US cuts off a country like Russia or Iran from the American banking system, the sanctions rarely work perfectly. Why? Because of Eurodollars. Intermediary banks in neutral financial hubs like Dubai, Singapore, or Hong Kong can move offshore dollars completely outside the sight and legal reach of Washington. It's also why inflation hits the entire world at once. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates in Washington, D.C., rents spike in London, mortgages get more expensive in Australia, and businesses lay off workers in Brazil. Because the global economy runs on this offshore dollar network, an interest rate tweak in America automatically chokes off dollar credit worldwide. The Fed is the accidental central bank of the planet. This explains why the 2008 financial crisis went global instantly. Bad mortgages in American suburbs were packaged into complex financial products and sold throughout this unregulated Eurodollar network. When the US housing market cracked, the global Ghost Network instantly transmitted that toxic risk to every bank on Earth, bringing the world economy to its knees. It's no coincidence that in October 2008, the exact month this global dollar crisis peaked, a programmer named Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper. Crypto wasn't just a response to local banks. It was a direct reaction to this exact shadow network. The Eurodollar was a borderless system created by accident, running in total secrecy. Crypto was an attempt to build a borderless system on purpose, running completely in public. Here lies the ultimate irony of the modern age. The United States did not design the Eurodollar system. They didn't authorize it, and for decades, they could barely even measure it. Yet it became the single greatest tool for American global dominance in human history. Because every single one of those 150 trillion offshore dollars is tied directly to the US currency. Every country, corporation, and foreign government on Earth absolutely needs dollars to survive. That pure, unavoidable dependence is America's true superpower. Not its military, and not its technology, but it's a lethal trap. The exact same system that makes the dollar irreplaceable makes it entirely uncontrollable. The US government cannot pull the plug on the Ghost Network without instantly causing a global economic collapse, destroying its own economy in the process. The Soviets tried to hide their money to escape American power. Instead, they made the dollar permanent. In trying to protect their own assets, they accidentally enslaved the global financial system to the US dollar for the next 75 years. We started with a simple question: how much money exists? But now you know the real question is, how much money exists in the dark corners of global ledger sheets, outside the view of any central bank? The truth is, nobody knows for sure. The real financial world doesn't operate in the light of regulated markets. It lives in the deep shadows between them. If this video completely changed how you look at the global economy, make sure to hit subscribe. Every week we pull back the curtain on the invisible forces shaping your life, the stories that never make it into your textbooks. Drop a comment below. Now that you know the Ghost Network exists, do you think it should be regulated, or is the chaos the only thing keeping global trade alive? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.